I would have to say new supply has really been pretty stagnant over the years since the downturn, with the lack of financing available for construction projects. We've been seeing a rise in construction activity, let's say for the past 2 years, with new supply currently entering the market. For example, like New York City, where a lot of the projects that were essentially planned and started 2 years ago with the limited construction financing available are now just coming up and opening this year, for example.
Well, I think it really varies by market. There are markets that have been undersupplied for so long that I think they'll absorb new supply fairly rapidly. I think even with the increased supply growth that we've seen, it's been moderate over the historical trends. So I think that the runway ahead is still pretty clear. But maybe ask me again in a couple of years.
Probably in the next 3 to 5 years, you are starting to see a point in time right now that it is sort of marginal, where it's almost becoming cheaper to build than to buy in certain situations. It's not there yet, but you are sort of seeing that in some markets.
Okay. I think it depends geographically where the new supply will have an effect. Some areas are growing faster than others. But I think in general, within the next year and a half or 2 years, new supply could be an issue in certain markets.
The impact to existing hotels will be there, but the new supply will come via hotels with strong fundamentals themselves. So hopefully this will benefit the markets overall.
I don't think it's a supply issue across the United States or in any particular market, but there is one that kind of comes to mind, and that's Chicago, where you look at a significant amount of development from the municipality. Chicago has actually approved another 1,000-room properties. There's one market in particular that has a supply issue. I know Manhattan's got somewhat of a supply boom going on, but I don't believe that's an issue in the market at all. The interesting thing about it is across the United States, I don't think it's a challenge in any of our markets.
I don't see new supply becoming a problem for quite a while. We've had historically low levels of new supply over the last 3 or 4 years. Where new supply generally is going to be about 2% of rooms, and we've seen it less than 1%. And it's going to take time for the new supply to come onto the market. In the meantime, the rest of the industry is really growing. We're seeing occupancy and now ADR improvements so that new supply can be absorbed easily.
Dennis, I really don't see new supply becoming a problem for the industry for at least a few more years. Based on what we're seeing with the projects that are coming out of the ground right now and projects that are entering the pipeline right now, new supply is at most about 1.4% in 2014 and about 1.6 to 1.7% in 2015. So historically, those are not numbers where you're going to see new supply become an issue.
I'm not sure that it's going to be in the next 2 to 3 years. I still think that new supply is slow in coming around. The cost to build, although is getting really close to where buying is right now. I mean, they're almost neck and neck. It's still, I think, much better to buy a property, renovate it, maybe reflag it. I just don't know about new development. It seems that most of the new development that I've seen has been in the select service, and if it does continue, it will continue that way. Building those big, large, full-service boxes, still a challenge.
Absolutely. At this point, I think we still have several more years to run from a supply perspective. If you look at the last cycle, you had an erosion of demand, not supply, right? Which is why we experienced the downturn. So I think going into the recovery, as the hospitality recovery started in 2010, I think from a supply perspective, we were in pretty good shape in most markets. I think away from several of the larger markets where you've started to see significant numbers of new supply in New York City, for example, I think the supply pipeline is generally pretty benign. I think it's been constrained by the lack of construction financing. So I think that we have a couple more years to run as you look out several years into the future.
people generally like to refer to these as a baseball game and always ask what inning they're in. And I think we're in the last third of the game, assuming no extra innings. I think we're probably in the 7th or 8th inning. It's been a nice run up and recovery from 2008, 2009. And I think we've got a couple years left, but I think we're more towards the end than at the beginning at this stage.